My name is Max. I'm from your Northwestern Alumni Association. We'll begin the presentation shortly. So excited that Becky and Rebecca could join us for this webinar. If you have any questions now or during the presentation that you'd like to ask, feel free to use the Ask Your Question box on the bottom right-hand side of your webinar dashboard. Just type in the question and hit send. We'll keep an eye on those and ask as many as we can at the end. We'll also be using the chat function for a few responses, so please save your questions for the Q&A and engagement responses for the chat. If you do have any technical issues during the call, please close the Zoom window and restart using the same registration link we gave you, or refresh your browser if you are using it from Safari or Chrome. Typically, issues are Wi-Fi related. And finally, we will be sending out a link to this webinar recording to all registrants, not just the folks that are joining us live, and we'll be sending out a post-event survey to all of our registrants as well. Please do fill that out. It really helps us introduce future content. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce our two speakers today, Becky and Rebecca. Becky Tsadik is a writer, editor, and marketing consultant. She's an expert brand builder and storyteller with a special focus on work with career seekers, small business owners, and startup founders. She has worked with organizations ranging from Google and Microsoft to TEDx and Africa Tech Summit. In this session, she will serve as both the moderator of discussion and as an invaluable career resource to our Northwestern alumni community. Rebecca Williams is a public speaking expert and author of Presenting, The Art of Public Speaking and How to Do It Better. She specializes in strategic narrative and leadership communication, especially for high-achieving individuals and organizations. She has served as a public speaking coach and adjunct professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Business and has coached professionals at companies like Google, Meta, and Netflix. She joins this talk as a special guest lecturer. Becky, Rebecca, thank you both for being here. Take it away.
Thank you, Max. All right, well, welcome everyone. Before we get started, we want to know where you're calling in from. So if you could type that in the chat, give us a sense of who's in the room, and then we'll get started. I'm personally in Lisbon, Portugal. And Becky, where are you?
I'm dialing in from St. Louis, Missouri. Hi, everyone. Hi, Rebecca. And thanks, Max.
Okay, great. Nice. So we've got Lorenzo from Chicago, Jennifer from Northern Illinois, lots of people from, Illinois, Milwaukee,
some great Midwest
Wisconsin people. Yeah, that makes sense. Southern California. Okay, Boston, Missouri, nice. Chicago, great. Cleveland, fantastic. Okay, I guess I'm the only international then. Everybody else is in the US. All right. Well, welcome. Dallas. Great. Oak Brook Terrace. All right. Well, welcome everybody.
In Dallas.
Nice. Look, Lima, Peru. Sandra is here from Lima, Peru. Well, welcome, Sandra. Welcome, welcome. All right. Shall we kick it off, Becky?
Yes. But before we kick it off, we're actually going to run two polls to get a sense of the vibe of the room. So I'm going to get our music back on here and ask that you share your responses. I'm going to launch those polls in just a moment. We have two questions. So here comes the first one. So we want to know, what have you noticed about the job market in the age of AI? We've got multiple choice responses for you there. So take a moment, look over, choose the one that resonates the most for you. See some replies coming in. Great. Thank you for your participation. Oh, coming in quick. Okay.
Great.
Wow. And for those of you that are selecting other, please share your answers in the chat. We definitely want to get a diversity of responses here, because whatever you're feeling, we guarantee that the feeling is shared with others on the call here. So let it out.
Great. All right. So Jim is saying running the ATS AI gauntlet before getting to a real human. Yeah, I've definitely heard that from other people.
Wow. And for those of you who have also answered question 2, I'll read it out loud here. How do you feel about the job market in the age of AI? So do make sure you share your replies to both questions here. We've got another option as well, so feel free to feel free to share your feelings if they're not represented there.
And Swati says, not sure how to incorporate AI with my type of work, healthcare provider. And Jeffrey says, is it possible to turn off the background hold music? Yeah, we can turn it off.
Sure.
Yeah. Maybe it was a little too loud, but we're all good now. Okay. So what do you think? I think
Great
we've got,
participation here.
89% of participants. So I say we end the poll and name what the winners are.
See, I'm ending the poll now. Thank you again for your responses. Okay. Oh, and I want to also flag this reply in the chat here. One thing our office has heard from alumni is a frustration with companies warning not to use AI in their resumes, but then having those same companies use AI to review those same resumes. Oh, the irony. I'm going to share the results here from our poll.
And then Frank says many job descriptions require AI skills without being clear about why. What is the organization trying to accomplish? It makes a difference. Yeah. Okay, great. All right. So what are the answers to our poll? What are the answers that rose to the top? It looks like for question 1, what have you noticed? Rejections are obviously impersonal and automated is the top answer. Okay. And then
number 2 here, how do you feel? Frustrated came out the winner. 64% of you all saying you feel frustrated.
Okay.
Well,
nice.
We're going to come back to these because what is interesting is there's a percentage of you that answered all of these. So while frustrated was the so-called winner, there's also folks who felt excited, scared, and others. So I'm going to stop sharing this for now, and we'll come back and discuss more as we go through our conversation. So I'm going to share a bit more about my story. So my road from studying journalism and Black studies at Northwestern to this moment has been very windy, but for the purposes of our conversation today, I'm going to focus on the last 6 years or so. So I moved to Ethiopia in 2019 to work as a marketer at an organic agriculture startup. Then I led marketing at a tech startup for 4 years. And at the end of 2023, I decided to strike out on my own as a consultant. When I was starting out, I could really rely on relationships and word of mouth to get clients. And I actually got my largest client when the CEO of that company DM'd me after a single LinkedIn post. So I felt like, oh, this is really easy. This is going really smoothly. And this year has been a completely different story. It's been personally challenging to land and retain clients. And I've been chasing not even growth, but stability. So in contrast to that experience I just described from when I first started out at the beginning of this year, 2025, I applied to 80 opportunities. So that was everything from fractional work to project-based grants. I filled out expression of interest forms, applied to writing competitions, in addition to also chasing clients. I interviewed with just 5 companies. I don't even want to do that math of what the percentage is. And I got 1 offer, just 1. I received rejection emails that said they had more than 1,000 applicants to a single role. I saw roles closed within hours of posting, so I didn't even get a chance to apply. I guess the bots beat me to those applications. And then I would get rejection emails rather at really weird hours that made me question whether a human had even looked at my application at all. And this was really frustrating for me, just like you all shared in your poll responses. I'm sure you're with me when I say that it feels like we deserve access to these opportunities that we worked really hard to access through years of education, the nights and weekends that we sacrificed. But the truth is that the context of the traditional job search market has radically changed because AI has entered the chat. So to share that in a few numbers, I'm going to click through a few slides here. So we're looking at the end of September, 95,000 jobs cut across the US, which is a record since 2020 when the pandemic hit. 14,000 jobs cut at Amazon alone. Again, this is back in September. The reasons they gave were because of AI and automation. And then lastly, we had our first AI hiring lawsuit in Mobley versus Workday, where it was proposed that the platform using AI discriminated against workers over 40. So as several attendees shared in the poll, they've had similar experiences to mine this year, where they're frustrated. They feel like a human's not actually looking at their application. And in fact, they feel that AI is not only taking jobs, but creating more friction in their application process, being almost a gatekeeper when it was promised to be this helper in getting more access to opportunities. So, Rebecca, let's talk about this. The title of this webinar is the AI opportunity. I want to hear from you. How is AI an opportunity in this context? Why? How can it be something not to be feared, but to be, tapped into this moment?
Yeah. So I know that there's a lot of fear out there, and I talk to people about it every day. It's all over the media. AI, it feels like it's coming for us. I actually had a chat with a colleague the other day, and she said, "Oh my God, AI is coming for us too," meaning the communicators, the people who work in our industry. And I think there is an opportunity to see AI as helping us really evolve the skills that we're really good at. I really see AI as an opportunity for us to be more human. And what does that mean? So what are humans great at? What have humans done since the beginning of time? We're storytellers, we're connectors, we're communicators. And sure, AI can, I'm going to put this in air quotes, tell a story. AI can communicate, but what AI can't do is have lived experience to then teach other human beings something, right? Like, this is why we exist, I really believe, as human beings, is to help each other and to create things together. And AI, the way I see it, is that AI it's helping us do the things that we don't necessarily need to be doing anymore, and giving us the opportunity to double down on things that we can really shine at. So for example, like what? Storytelling. Like I said, the people who are going to succeed in the age of AI are the storytellers. Why? Because stories create emotions, stories connect people. And really, it's still all about people. Business is about relationships, right? Like, still the easiest way to get a job is to find somebody in that company who is a friend or a friend of a friend. I get requests like that all the time. Hey, do you know someone working at whatever? I was just talking to Max before we got on the call, saying that he was helping his friend get a job at Northwestern. So really, I want us to remember that the opportunity here is to lean into our humanity and to lean into what it means to be human, and that is to be storytellers. So I hope that lands well, because that's the way I see it. And frankly, I'm very excited about AI for that reason.
I love that positioning. It's a nice, refreshing contrast from all of the fear mongering around AI. And I would like to double click on one AI in particular, because as I know that you've been traveling for these past few months, and you were recently at an event where OpenAI's Sam Altman was also on the guest list. What would you ask him about?
He didn't attend. He didn't attend. Let me be clear.
Okay.
I'm sure he gets asked to a lot of events. He wasn't there. I was like, whoa, Sam Altman's coming? But no, he didn't come. But yes,
Well, if he
please ask
had
your
been
question.
there, what would you have asked him about his vision for the impact of AI on hiring specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would have a particular question for him about like hiring, but here's what I would want him to say about hiring. And this is also what I believe. And that is in the short term, it's going to get messy. It already is messy, right? Like you showed a lot of those numbers. And, I have to say too that, for example, the 14,000 jobs cut by Amazon number, Amazon says it's due to AI. And I've also read in other places that companies are using AI as a scapegoat for firing for other reasons. So let's let's be honest about that maybe AI isn't the only villain in the room. Like there's other things going on, and it's just convenient right now to point our fingers at AI. But yes, it's going to be messy at the beginning, and I think Sam Altman would agree with this. I don't think there's any way around that. We can't sugarcoat it. But what I do know is that whenever new disruptive technology comes along, there are always net new jobs. So, for example, the printing press, right? When the printing press came around back in the 1400s, what were we doing for books? Well, we had scribes, right? And scribes, very few people could write. And so the scribes had all the work. There were very few books. There were very few people who could read. Then the printing press came along. What happened to the scribes? Well, maybe they still got some work, maybe like the fancy manuscripts, some people would commission them, but most people were focused on, oh, printing, this is cool. What's this, right? And so then printers got jobs, and who else? Teachers, publishers, right? So many industries were born from that single invention. The whole information industry was born from that disruption. And I'm sure at the time, they couldn't see into the future. I'm sure at the time, all the scribes thought, oh shit, like this is terrible. What are we going to do? And, maybe a lot of them did lose their jobs, but a lot of other people got jobs that they never even knew could exist, and it rippled affected into the world. So that's really what I see, and what I hope Sam Altman sees as well, is that the repetitive tasks and these things that, sure, we know how to do them. Amazon workers know how to take a box and take it off a shelf and put it on a what do they call it, conveyor belt or something like that. But do we really want to be doing that as a species? I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't want people to lose their jobs, but I do want people to have jobs that feel meaningful to them and that feel creative and that feel somewhat challenging. And I'm, just like with robots, I'm like, yeah, make the robots wash my car. I don't care. Like I don't want to do that. Um, so it is going to be messy. I really believe that. And it's going to take time for these other jobs to come in, the jobs that we can't even imagine right now, the industries that we can't even imagine right now to blossom. But I am hopeful about once we get through this time of challenging uncertainty. I think we're going to come out in a better place. What do you think about that, Becky?
Again, I'm relieved to hear that take on it, and it's very helpful for you to remind us of those specific examples that we already know have happened across history, but we forget to create a linkage to what we're going through right now, which you didn't use this term specifically, but we're in transition. We're not at an end state of now AI has happened to us, and this is how things are going to be now. We're in a transition, a figuring out period where we have the opportunity to build alongside and figure out what things will look like in our own individual futures. So I like the approach of recognizing not only the agency that we have as individuals, but again, that we've been here before. And there are loads of even more modern examples with Airbnb and Uber that were these tech disruptors to the market, where there was this outcry, changes in legislation, strikes, saying that you are going to take these jobs and this is a threat, but it's actually now blossomed into so many different opportunities. And then the innovation didn't stop either. Uber is not only rides, it's food, it's
Mhm.
groceries, it's helicopters. So it's not going to stop. So the question then is, how are we going to adapt? And like you said, look inward and say, well, either how can I learn new skills, or look at pivoting and look at something else. So
Yeah,
I
and
think
I
even
want to
just
say
that
one more.
mindset.
Yeah, I want to say one more thing to that is that we all know that the only constant is change, right? And this is just one of these examples. And again, the people who are going to struggle the most are the people who are holding on to a past that doesn't exist anymore, right? Who are looking in the rearview mirror being like, it used to be like this. And,
Hmm.
yes, it's okay to have emotions and to be pissed and frustrated and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, like we have to look in the forward facing direction. And we've got to be creative. And I really believe stay positive, because that's how you surf. Like when things are coming at you, waves are coming at you. Yeah, you got to stay positive. So I mean, I could be accused of being too positive. I'm a very positive person, but I really do believe that that net new jobs are going to be a good thing for us once we get past this messy onset of AI.
The messy middle that we're in. So we've talked generally about AI's use within companies and in the job search process, the vetting process. Let's talk about a specific example. You have done and you continue to do work teaching and coaching within companies like YouTube. I would love to hear what you've seen and heard on the ground while you're working with these companies about how they're using AI within their organizations.
Mhm. Yeah, well, it's interesting. I was on a call recently with a company that I've been working with for about 6 months. It's a blockchain venture fund out of Europe, and it's funny because the CEO, we were talking about a particular part of our work together, and he said, "Oh yeah, and then there's this," and he's like, "But now we have AI to do that," and he just kind of waved his hand, and with that hand wave kind of like waved part of my work out the window. And it struck me for a second. I was like, huh, and it didn't feel good at the time. But then I really thought about it and I was like, I didn't really want to do that anyway. Good. I'm glad AI is going to do that for me. And I'm going to do this other thing that I really want to work on. I'm going to double down on that. And so what I've been noticing is that people in I mean that's a smaller company. It's about 30 people, but even at big organizations like YouTube, for example, that I did a lot of projects with this summer, people, they're trying to figure out how to use AI, right? Right now it's almost anything goes, right? So they're trying things, they're realizing what doesn't work pretty fast. It's a pretty quick learning cycle right now. And one of the things that has been interesting is that, and myself included, we've all, well, maybe not we all, but I know I started using AI in a way that now I don't use it like that anymore at all. And I realized pretty quickly, like, oh, wait, this is actually making me stupider to do this, right? So now I've given AI the role as my teacher, my coach, to make me better. So I don't tell it to give me the answer. I tell it to essentially coach me to understand how I can be better at this task I'm trying to do. So I'll say, for example, I do a lot of writing in my work, and I'll say, okay, here's this thing I've written. This is the goal. This is the objective. Give me feedback as a top tier writing instructor on how this can be better. And then it will spit back the answer, and then I will go back in and adjust it. Now, a friend of mine did a post on LinkedIn recently. He's a marketing expert as well out of Vienna. And it was very interesting because he said that brands that use AI, oh yeah, do we have a slide on this? I forgot. Right. So brands that use AI, obviously so, it's been shown that trust has gone down in those brands, and people when they sense that AI is being used, so maybe it's like a certain style of writing, like it's sad, I know that M dash is very much now associated with AI, which really sucks because as a writer, the M dash has a purpose. I was using the M dash before AI, and now I feel like I can't use it anymore. But anyway, his point with the study is that when we use AI in place of our own unique voice, then that trust goes down because we're not telling our own stories. We're essentially allowing AI to do that for us. And then what happens is that everything ends up becoming kind of beige, right? Everything ends up sounding the same, looking the same, because the point of AI is synthesis. So really, we have to ask ourselves, how can we maintain our unique voices and tell our unique stories, even in the presence of AI? And I really believe it's all in the way we use it and in being smart about how we use it. What's this slide about?
This is the second
Becky?
slide from his same post. I really appreciated you sharing that with me. It's definitely an intriguing data-based reflection on what is the impact. We, being in marketing, there's a lot of hard numbers that we constantly measure, whether it is number of likes, reshares, comments, but something like this, like measuring intent to buy. So this one, going back to your point about sharing your own unique voice, this is very troubling. This is a very troubling result because, of course, you want content that's going to convert your audience to become buyers. That's the point, or at the very least to build trust in the brand. And so when you have irrefutable data like this that shows people feel wary and are not so sure, it's doubly damaging. Not only is their intent to buy less guaranteed, but it prickles that trust that you were talking about, where it then brings into question these larger issues of, well, if there's not a real human here, I mean, how many times have we been on the phone with an automated voice system where we end up screaming me because they just don't understand what I'm actually trying to say. So it's frustrating, and it does damage that brand trust. And I'll speak to my own experience and how I've learned, and I'm learning to use AI in a way that's actually useful to me, because I love that you shared your specific example. I also, as a writer and marketer, was excited to then have this tool that could help me create content more quickly. Where I struggled, and especially in some of the earlier versions, was training it on my voice or my client's voice, and consistently feeling like, okay, this feels on brand, or this feels authentic, especially in doing work where I'm done ghostwriting work for founders. It's not just about, does it sound like the brand, but does it sound like this person? So when it doesn't, it just feels off. And again, that goes back to that trust damaging. So I've definitely adapted how I've used it. The tools themselves have also gotten a lot better. But I'll share one way that I really found valuable. It was a series of conversations that I had last year. As Max mentioned earlier, while I'm a marketing consultant for businesses, I also do work with individuals to help them in their career development. I've got a newsletter on the same. And I had a series of one-on-one conversations with early stage career-minded folks where I took the notes from those conversations. It was like 15 conversations. I plugged them into AI and I said, help me find themes across these conversations. Because when you're having those one-on-one discussions, the individual's story resonates and you remember the details. We've been talking about how story lands, but it can be difficult to zoom out and see what are the common threads and the linkages among them. And so doing that and iterating on it really helped me to see that even though one woman I spoke to had been out of the workforce for 2 years to raise her children and was trying to get back in, and another person had been in a job but was, trying to make a pivot, it helped me to see that each of them were at an inflection point and they needed to make some hard decisions and get guidance on what's the next best move for me. So even though the individual scenarios were not the same, it helped me to see the common threads across and how I could then share resources and create content to speak to those different audiences in a way that would actually land for them. So that's where I have found use, in AI. That's just one example where I might, as a thinking individual, empathize and resonate with their individual stories. It helped me give that perspective and really pull out data from those individual conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, AI, I think part of the conversation that's troubling that I notice a lot of people having is it's kind of like AI or not. It almost feels like should we support AI or not? It's this polarization again. And I mean, I'm American. I used to live in the US. Maybe it's just kind of the way we've been conditioned around politics. Like, are you with us or against us? And I really feel like, based on what you said, and I know the way I use AI, it's like, how about yes and like using AI to make us better? Like I think that is the intention, at least for my perspective of how I use AI, is I'm using this thing to make me unstoppable and fierce in all the things that I do. And I get worried about people. And I know a lot of them who haven't even tried any kind of AI yet. And they're scared and they're pessimistic and negative. And I'm like, wow, okay, that I wouldn't recommend that. Like I would recommend getting in there and getting your feet wet, and figuring out how you can use it to make yourself better. So yeah, there are a lot of different ways that we can make ourselves better with it.
Love it. Well, you used the printing press example earlier, so I think that's a great point to come back to so we can chat briefly about your book, Presenting, the Art of Public Speaking and How to Do It Better. So in this, you double click on two elements of effective presentations. Number one, the importance of structure, and number two, the importance of storytelling. So let's zoom that in to this conversation. I'd love to hear from you how these principles apply to job seekers, and from the beginning of the process, the networking, the informal coffee chats, the question that you said earlier, do you know anyone at this company, all the way through to actually submitting an application, going for an interview. How can they use these tools to their advantage?
Yeah, well, so much of my work is built around storytelling, and I've been obsessed with storytelling ever since I was a kid. My dad was an opera director, and he would always pull me up on the stage to act in the operas. I would never sing, I would just act in these roles. And he taught me how to command attention from a stage. So I learned a lot from my dad about storytelling. And I've lived all over the world, and I've helped people share their stories in, first off as an English as a second language teacher, and now just in companies. And what's really powerful about stories is that people remember stories. It's hard to forget a good story, right? It's easy to forget vague stuff. It's easy to forget data. But a story, there's something about it hooks into our brain because it's the oldest way that we've shared ideas, oldest structure, right? And so storytelling does have a structure, and that structure is really hardwired within us. We can't help it to remember it. So storytelling is really powerful for job interviews, for networking, all these things, because it's memorable. And not only is it memorable, but stories also create connection naturally. So, for example, I was working with this CEO, this blockchain venture fund I was talking about, and we wrote his keynote for a recent conference. And one of the frameworks that I talk about in the book is called the first five formula. And Becky, I know that you use the first five formula for this webinar. And the first five formula, it goes like this. It's connect, hook, point, problem, agenda. So this formula, and I'll talk about it briefly in a second, this formula, I use this to launch into any kind of webinar, presentation, keynote, whatever it might be, because I have battle tested this and I know it works. So what are these again? It's connect. So how do you connect? You connect by usually by asking a question. That's the easiest way to do it. You don't have to, but I find that's the easiest way to do it. Connect, hook. Hook is always the story. How are you going to hook their attention? And again, people have a hard time not listening to a story. It's easier to tune out if someone is saying, oh, I have 25 years of experience doing marketing, right? Blah, blah. It's kind of boring. But if they launch into a story, then immediately you're kind of leaning in, right? So connect, hook, point. What's your point? Problem. Introduce a problem, because problem is also, that's part of story structure, right? When you think about it, think about any movie or film that you've ever seen, there's always a problem right at the beginning. And then the whole movie is about solving that problem. So that's just story structure. Introduce a problem in your presentation or talk or keynote so that people lean in and want to listen to the rest of your presentation. And then agenda, you don't have to add that in. Like, for example, in the keynote, we didn't add in an agenda, but giving people a sense of what's coming so they can organize what you're saying in their head as you're talking. Okay, so I always use that structure, and obviously including a story right at the beginning, because I know stories work because they're interesting, they're memorable, and they create that connection right away. So that's one framework that I talk about in the book, and I mean we could talk about stories all day, but I think I've said enough to this question right now. You can tell I'm really excited about it.
Well, I'll add to that, having, as you mentioned, used that tool, that framework myself, it is also very calming. It's the difference between staring at a blank page and saying, oh my God, where do I start? Versus actually having an outline that you can follow. And it's the same thing when you're speaking. It's also makes it easier to remember, okay, what portion comes next? What's the natural transition? So when we talk about storytelling, it's not just doing it off the cuff necessarily, although that is the point that you want to ideally get to, so you can respond in a human way to interview questions, for example, or even if you're on a panel discussion. But having these frameworks preloaded and knowing that you can pull them out, as needed, is also very confidence building. And as you said, Rebecca, it gives the listener a roadmap and something to follow. So thank you for giving that example. I hope that at the end we also have some time to share a little bit more about how you and I connected, because I think that's also a perfect tie into this message that we're trying to share about the power of human connection and storytelling. So I'll tease to that. All right, next question. So you wrote in your newsletter about the importance of rehearsing before a performance and how it's an underutilized skill in confidence building, which is something I also just referenced. So can you talk about how job seekers can prepare for an interview without coming across as robotic? And especially given that they don't necessarily know, and most of the time don't know exactly what questions will be asked.
Yeah, of course. So the way I work with people to help them what would you say, like deliver, or I wanted to say like ace their interview or whatever you want to call it, just like make a good impression, right? Is to have stories in their back pocket, right? So maybe you don't know what the questions are, but you can guess, right? We all do this. We're all like, okay, I think they're going to ask me this. I think they're going to ask me this. Of course, there are tons of questions that always get asked, like, what's your biggest strength? What's your biggest weakness, right? Like these are just low-hanging fruit. So what you can do is, having guessed at what the questions might be, then you can create a spreadsheet and drop in a story for each one of these questions that you can reference, because stories are just examples, right? So for example, if the question is, what's your biggest weakness? Then maybe I would say like, well, my biggest weakness is sometimes being, um, overly positive or something like that. And then I could tell a story about this webinar when I was so positive about AI before it destroyed the world. No, I'm kidding. But you see what I'm saying is that a story is just an example of a statement. Okay. So for example, Becky is a great marketer. Let me tell you about this work she did with this client, right? And then blah, blah, blah. And that's the story. So the stories are just examples of the statements that you're making. And the beautiful thing about that is that, number one, you're not making up stories, right? We don't do that. So your stories are easy to share because they're from your life. You don't need to memorize a story. It's just there, right? So that makes your interviewing easier, because all you have to do is you have to remember which story that you want to tell and then tell it. Now, what I would recommend, and we talked about rehearsing, and one of my favorite quotes is from the actor. He's a 1970s actor, so I don't know how many of you are going to know him. His name was Donald Pleasance. And he said, all the real work gets done in rehearsal. And I really agree with that, because I know when I'm about to deliver a talk or a workshop and I'm rehearsing in my bedroom or wherever, in my hotel room, if I don't feel kind of bored with my content, then I know I'm not ready yet. If I still feel a little like anxiety, I know I'm not ready yet. And I just keep rehearsing, keep rehearsing. And you can rehearse telling your stories, but obviously you don't want to sound robotic. So what do? The goal of rehearsing a story is to make it as concise as possible, but not too concise, right? So you want to cut out any superfluous details that don't lead them to where you're taking them, which is the period of the story. And you want to get your answer down, 2.5 minutes. A story that goes over 2.5 minutes is too long for most situations, right? We've all been at dinner parties where we're like, when is this person going to shut up or finish their story, right? There's an attention span thing, and we have to be aware of that. So 2.5 minutes, know what story you're going to tell, and then practice telling it. And there are AIs you can train with. I use one all the time called Yoodly, YOODLI.ai. There's a free plan, and you can use it, and it will give you feedback on your storytelling. So for example, if you're telling the story and then you kind of go off into a rabbit hole about something that doesn't pertain to the story, it'll tell you. And that's the kind of stuff that you really need to rehearse, is being concise and making sure everything you're saying has a point and a direction. So yeah, I really recommend rehearsing that. And one more thing I'll say about this is that when you're telling stories to back up statements about yourself, those stories, not only are they interesting and memorable, but they help you build conviction in yourself, right? So if I say something like I remember recently I was applying for like a business grant or something through INSEAD, which is this business university here in Europe somewhere. And Becky, you sent me this application, right? And I'm filling out the application, and, there's a little voice inside my head that's like, you're never going to get this. You're not qualified. Da, da. And as I am creating my deck and like telling the story of why I want the grant, I convinced myself. I was like, wow, I'm doing a great job. Like I am awesome and I should definitely get this grant. So this is this conviction that you need to have. And by pulling up stories and reminding yourself that, yeah, actually you are great because you did that thing and you changed this company and blah, blah, blah. It's going to help you feel better about yourself in that very stressful situation. So yeah, I recommend find these stories about yourself and tell them.
There's a couple of really useful takeaways that I want to reiterate that I appreciate. You said no story should be longer than 2.5 minutes. I think that's so helpful to not only keep in mind, but to time ourselves when we are writing down and practicing these stories, to be cognizant of the listener's time, the interviewer's time. And two, the tool that you mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, that one also flags for you when you use too many filler words or speak too quickly or have too many pauses. So it acts as a listener to give you that feedback that a real human probably isn't going to be able to give you specifically, but they will just realize that I got lost. The person was talking and then I got lost. So they'll have the experience of not being able to follow what you say, but they won't necessarily know why. So
yeah,
I really appreciate those specific takeaways. I'm mindful of our time here, and there were a few other things that we wanted to touch on. So
yeah.
I want to move now into more tangible takeaways. When you shared the framework earlier about the first 5. I'd love to hear any other frameworks that you can share for a question like, tell me about a time or tell me about yourself.
Yeah. So one of the questions that really trips a lot of people up is tell me about yourself. I mean, how hard is that to answer for anybody? I mean, you've had how many years on this planet? You've had a lot of experiences. Like, how do you sum it up? So there is a resource that I created, and in the follow-up email, we'll give you a link to get the PDF that really breaks this down for you, because I found it to be very helpful. It's called the Red Thread Story Builder. And what this does is it helps you communicate who you are in a way that lands with other people in a concise way. So, we've all had a lot of titles. I've been a million different things, but titles aren't enough to communicate who we are as people. So that's why you have to figure out, what is this red thread? In other words, like, what is your professional why that's run through your life that helps you attract and take opportunities? Like, what motivates you essentially? So, and then understanding that, you can really make sense of your journey for others by saying this framework. So the framework is this, and again, we'll share this PDF with you in follow-up email. So it's 3 parts. The first is the hook. So essentially, again, hook is storytelling, right? Showing your personality and your origins. Second is what I like to call the identity bridge. And the identity bridge is just this professional why. This is your red thread. So naming what that is. And then finally, what are you doing now? Okay. So great. Becky's sharing that with us right now. And yeah, so you've got these 3 parts: the hook, the identity bridge or your professional why, and then the what I'm doing now. So all of this together gives people a sense of, oh, I get who this person is. And now it makes sense why they did that thing. Okay. So I'll give you an example of my red thread so that you can understand how it works. So Becky, ask me the question, tell me about yourself.
Oh, so nice to meet you. Now tell me about yourself.
Oh, nice to meet you too. Thanks for that question, Becky. Well, growing up, I was the kid who was always on the stage. It was either in my dad's operas or in productions where I was the director and the star. I loved being the center of attention. I loved making people laugh, and I loved telling stories. And I used to think that my work was about performing, but I know now that at its core, my work is really about helping people show up just as they are. It's about helping them connect. And what excites me most right now is preparing myself to be more visible by launching a podcast, because even I still struggle with connecting just as I am. Okay, so that's an example of using this three-part framework to answer that question and to tell the story of who you are. Okay, so I hope that's helpful for you. Like we said, we'll send a link to that in the follow-up email. And I encourage you to try it out and test that out in your next job interview or at a networking event and see how it feels. You'll want to change it, like it's a living thing. But I encourage you to have something like that in your pocket ready when people ask you that question.
We got some heart reactions here. Love it. Thank you.
Oh, nice. Yay.
Yes, so that landed. Such a useful framework. And like you said,
Awesome.
gives you something to actually write down and then practice, and to practice coming off book with. I think that's the key there, is also how do you say it in a way that feels organic and that you realize it's okay to swap one word for the other and be human, to be human in the moment. So I want us to end on more practical steps. You've given us 2 frameworks now. So let's talk more about additional practical steps to beat the bot. So red thread is one. And as Rebecca mentioned, this will be in the follow-up. So if you didn't get a chance to write it all down or take a screenshot, you'll have a sheet that you can use to, practice your own, putting together your own red thread story. But what are some other ideas of how we can, move forward in harmony with AI in this particular context?
Yeah. Well, you know what I'm going to say, tell more stories. And it's true that I know that I check my engagement on LinkedIn. I post a lot on LinkedIn. And the posts that always get the most engagement are the posts where I'm telling stories, Sure, I'm always teaching because I'm a teacher. But when I share something about myself, when I'm vulnerable, those are the posts that get the most engagement. So see, it's an opportunity to be vulnerable and to connect with other people by sharing part of yourself. I really, truly believe that that is the gift of AI, because AI cannot do that. AI is never going to do that. I mean, well, okay, I'm not going to say never. Maybe one day AI is going to do that, but not in the way humans can. It's not. So share more about yourself, be more vulnerable, connect with other people. I mean, my God, that is the underline of the underline in this whole conversation, is make those relationships, make them matter, make them count, because that's what we're doing here, right? Every day we meet people and we feel weird when we don't connect. I know I do. Sometimes I work from home all day and I leave my house and I'm like, am I a human? Like, what's going on? I feel like I'm connected to my laptop. But that's the point, is that we need to use the time that's being saved for us by AI, right? To then invest that into human beings and relationships and connection.
And thank you for that. And I want to applaud all of you for taking the step of staying connected to the Northwestern Alumni Network and other alumni. This is that in practice, connecting with each other. And with that, I'm going to share my screen one last time so that we can make sure we stay connected to each of you. So this is going to be the links and QR code to Rebecca and I's LinkedIn pages, because we definitely want to stay connected with, oops, let me pause that. I want to make sure I shared the correct thing. And I'm going to also drop in the chat and encourage each of you to share your LinkedIn links in the chat so you can connect with each other. There we go.
Yeah, I don't envy you managing all the screen share and stuff, Becky.
The music.
It's a hard job. I know. Yeah, and I'm realizing we have a question in the chat that we should a question in the chat and in the Q&A box. So we've got a few seconds. Shall we answer those, Becky?
Yes, let's definitely go for that. I'm just dropping our links
Awesome.
here. Our LinkedIn
Okay.
links.
So
Because-
Tad is asking in the Q&A chat, he's saying, thanks for sharing Udly AI. In addition to sharing feedback about content and delivery, does it provide feedback on structure? Yes, it does. It's not super advanced that way, but it can give you feedback on the structure of the story. And I know I have a proprietary version of Udly, and I've trained it with my content. So it will give very deep feedback on the storytelling because I've trained it. But the free version, it's not going to be that deep. All right. And then we had another question. Gina asked, she said, so in light of today's hot mess of a job market, as discussed at the beginning of the call, are the best applications for storytelling in the cover letter, one's LinkedIn content, etc.? Recognizing that many job applications resumes get stalled with the bots before the candidate gets called for an interview. Becky, what do you think about that?
I think it's an interesting, I think that's an interesting juxtaposition, because my answer to that question is that it's all of those things. It's not an either or. It's you referenced LinkedIn.
I
We're
agree.
connecting here on LinkedIn. I mentioned earlier that I got a client because of one LinkedIn post. So it remains an effective platform for getting more visible. I've consistently read something over the last 2 years, something like 1% of people post consistently on LinkedIn, something like that. So
1%?
I don't know
Wow.
if that's accurate to today, but it's it's less than 10% of people post consistently, and the rest are scrolling, reacting, commenting. So it might look like a crowded market, but it's not. Like, go out there and share your stories, because Rebecca, just like you shared, I also have found that I get the most genuine responses to the stories where I share personal stories, the posts where I share personal stories. And that's not just in comments, but DMs that I get, which then leads to people sharing their emails, their WhatsApps, and then conversations and whole relationships are built out of that, and business, like actual business leads as well.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we've got 2 minutes left. Max, do you have anything to say to end our call, or?
First of all, I want to thank Becky, Rebecca. This was phenomenal, and I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but thank you to all the alums who were so active in the chat. This was a really, really interactive workshop. I'm so happy that you were not only reacting to what was being said in the webinar, but reacting to each other's comments. And thank you again, Rebecca and Becky, for allowing people to connect on LinkedIn. That is the whole purpose of our office. So we're very excited to have people connect with one another. We've got tons of other resources on our alumni careers page. And just as a reminder to everybody who is watching this during the recording session, if you're not in this live, please feel free to check your email. We'll be sending all of these links that Rebecca and Becky have mentioned over in that email as well. So much good content here. AI moves pretty quickly, so we try to stay on top of this content, and these are just two of the absolute best people to talk about this. We so appreciate it. Thank you everybody again for joining. Rebecca, Becky, we really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks, Max.
Yeah.
Thanks, Becky. This was fun.
Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you online.
Thanks
Yeah.
all. Go Cats.
Go Cats.